What's up, movie world? Man of Steel will be in theater soon, so let's prepare for this epic Zack Snyder Christopher Nolan reboot with a movie night journey through the entire Superman series.
I review movie previews.
This will be a special movie night series because normally I do them on my own. But for this one, I brought in a longtime friend who is a Superman movie fanatic. First up, Richard Donner's classic, Superman, the movie. Over 30 years later, it's still inspiring the comic book movies of today. What wisdom and knowledge does this original have to offer to the re-prophet? Have the lessons of what made the first film such a mega hit been remembered or forgotten? Let's search for its movie truth in this feature-length analysis. So get your copy of the film queued up and ready to play in 3, 2, 1. So here we go, Superman, the movie. Interesting that back then they had to call it the movie.
And this really was the first big comic book movie.
That, you know,
I mean, they had the serials, but
right. And they're kind of, I guess, doing a little homage to that right now.
right.
We're at 47 seconds into the movie and we're getting the comic book. So this is 1978.
Yes.
And this is well before any kind of comic book renaissance into the movies that we have nowadays. It's a totally different movie world back then.
And comic books aren't nearly as popular at the time.
How the idea of Hollywood adapting one and making a big film out of it, that's probably a new idea.
Yeah, and I would say this is probably the only one they could do at the time because everybody knows who Superman is. I mean,
yeah.
1978. I mean, I guess everybody knows Batman from the old camp TV show at the time, but.
And I guess Batman had a movie, but it was basically
and Spider-Man had a show, I guess, but it's...
Yeah.
They were all kind of thought it was silly. I think Superman was the only one that didn't have that campy background at the time.
Tell me why you were so passionate about doing this movie night. Because you knew I was going to do one. You're like, if you don't call me up to do this movie night, we're not friends anymore. You're out of my life.
Because I would say, I mean, going back to childhood is probably all four movies, yes, including the terrible ones, are probably my most watched movies. I mean, more than the Star Wars trilogy or anything. Like, these are the ones that I watched over and over, so I kind of just know them by heart.
Holy cow. So give me an estimate.
Even like Superman 4, I know like way too much about that movie that no person should know.
So in other words, you are a bona fide Superman movie expert.
Sure,
a passionate fanboy expert.
If watching them many times and play acting them with my cousin, it makes that person an expert. Then yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about this. This credit sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it just have like that epic feel?
Well, I think most of the epic feel comes from the score, which.
And you were saying you like it as John Williams' best score?
I don't. Of course, there's an argument, but I definitely think it's his best score. I think it fits the tone just perfectly, and it's iconic and heroic and all this. And not just the theme. I mean, the theme is great, but just the score throughout the movie is excellent.
And this is John Williams, like in his creative Superman stage.
This is a year after Star Wars,
and he'll be doing Raiders, and this is when he starts basically scoring our childhood.
Yeah, every blockbuster movie that you can think of was probably done by John Williams in this period, from late 70s to early 80s.
And notice we're 3 minutes and 43 seconds into the movie,
yes.
And we're still going through.
We're still going through that.
We're getting the cool effects. Yeah. John Barry, production designer, and you get the three-dimensional title sequence. Which was back then, this really hadn't been done before. It was a very new kind of epic feel.
Right. I mean, this is what, a year after Star Wars. This was the beginning of the
blockbuster,
the big summer movie event films, and. Yeah, it really makes you feel in this whole flying through the galaxy thing.
Yeah, and I remember as a little kid, this really just creates the mood, and it really makes you feel like you're entering this kind of fantastic kind of realm. The music combined with the visuals, it just feels like a super heroic film.
And you see Storio by Mario Puzo of all people, so I mean they really wanted to treat it with respect.
Yeah.
Which,
and that was
is
a new
completely different
angle.
at the time. Yeah. I mean, again, you can look back at the way things were treated otherwise. You can look at the old Spider-Man show or the old Batman show, and they're just...
It's like for kids, it's
they're
campy.
for kids, they're fun, you know.
And the Richard Donner was... A lot of people were saying that there would be no Christopher Nolan Batman without Richard Donner Superman.
Probably not, no. Something that takes the source material and tries to do it in a relatively mature manner. I mean, they're still fun in these movies, which is important.
Yeah, so we'll see. I think the performance and obviously the direction by Donner, who at this point, the performance by Christopher Reeve.
One thing I like from listening to the commentary, I mean, anyone who's actually watched the TV and listened to the commentary, but I love the practical effects. Like this right here is something this is just a garbage can filmed from on high, like in a dark room that was just lit up.
Wow.
With,
so again,
this is just like, simple things like that are just...
well before CGI. Five minutes 54 seconds. We're zooming into the sun, zooming into...
Yeah, when you get the fanfare here, which is, again, just... The music really sets the mood here.
I have a theory that I've really been pushing lately, is that a movie is almost only as memorable as its score. If you think about the movies that really kind of hang with you, they more than likely they have a powerful score that enhanced. It was a good movie, written well, right. But that score takes movies to the next level.
Personally, there's very few scores that I can really recall from beyond my childhood. I mean, again, all the Williams ones and some of the other ones from the 80s, but since then I don't think there's any that really have resonated that much. I mean, there's something like Requiem for a Dream, but that's probably because just it was everywhere for however many years.
Sure. And then they started playing with every trailer ever.
Exactly.
The commentary on... I know there's multiple commentaries for the first film. I listened to the one with the producers, and they were saying that this film kind of captured a lot of the talented practical effects artists from like 2001, that end of the 60s and into the 70s, Star Wars. Nowadays, this movie couldn't be made with practical effects because those experts are gone.
Yeah.
And now here at 7 minutes 22 seconds, we're getting a setup for the soon-to-be sequel.
Right. And yeah, that's again, we were talking about this earlier, that I don't think you could say anybody was thinking about anything in terms of a franchise or anything. So this seems kind of audacious to set up these characters in this beginning of this movie that you never see again throughout this movie. At least throughout the first one, and just setting it up for a sequel, which...
Because back then...
I guess they're filming them back-to-back, so you know what's going to happen, but that's a pretty big risk to take.
Yeah, in 1978, this is a revolutionary idea that you're going to film two big-budget films, back-to-back, and release them one year after the other, and be certain of it.
Right.
Because you had sequels before. I feel like horror movies kind of influenced a lot of the sequel craze also, like in the 70s, 80s. Right. So that hasn't even happened yet before this. You had Godfather 1 and 2. You always had the serials earlier in the day, Thin Man, all those, but never on a big scale like this. So it's a very huge move for them to decide, like, we're going to do two of these. And like you say, set up these characters. Normally, I think if this was done today, the audience might be wondering, hey, when are we going to cut back to those guys in the mirror that's floating through space? Right. But they just kind of, just set it up. And I remember being a kid and just being like, I want to know more about these guys. They look, cool. And talk about
you see this whole, just this entire setup of Krypton. I mean, they spend, the first 30 minutes, 40 minutes, even on Krypton itself, before you ever see, and it's, an hour and something till you actually see Superman.
Right.
That wouldn't fly to get today. There's no...
It's taking its time to just be like, here, we're going to really try to give some drama to it.
Right.
I mean, it's written by the guy who wrote The Godfather, and it's starring the guy. Marlon Brando's in it.
Yeah, this sets up this guy who wants to take a revenge here. And then we get the Phantom Zone coming out.
Which is a cool... I'm surprised has anyone named a band that, or maybe they haven't become popular, the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
That's just a cool idea. And again, I don't know much about the comics. I never really got into Superman.
Honestly, I don't either. I mean, I know enough. Just I've Wikipedia'd a lot of comic books.
How cool is this shot?
quick.
10 minutes. This
Right.
like this dome opening up, and that's all practical.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That looks. I prefer this over a lot of the CGI that we see today. Give me, even though that's just a miniature right here, and it's kind of overly dramatic. It looks cool.
Well,
as
it's
shit,
also
man. This
yeah,
is so
it's-
cool.
It's well composed too. I mean, that's part of it.
Beautifully shot. I mean, this is a very epic, trying to be like that kind of, I don't know, 2001-y, like let's set a grand kind of scale going on. Look how cool this is. How did they do this without a computer? It looks really cool. There it is. The Phantom Zone coming to get them.
This effect is cool, but then it's a little.
Once
It's
they're in
a,
it.
it's a little dated.
Yeah, here we go.
You see the
spin cam?
the spin cam, the Batman style spin cam, and just the trapped in the
But for that time, this is just like, wow.
right.
Forgive me, I shall return. I shall return. So there's just the most blatant, there will be a sequel, I'm going to get you kind of thing. But setting up some good, if we take this from a serious point of view like Godfather,
Right.
you wrong the family, now the family's going to get revenge against your family kind of thing. So it's that same... Here we have some go green before the green movement got popular, where Jor-El was basically the scientist saying that the Kryptonians are destroying their environment, or he's read some signs,
Right.
but no one believes him. What about the suits here? Talk about the light up.
Yeah, the glowing garbage bag type suits, I guess. How do you make something look like an alien world without overdoing it to a certain extent, and without making it look goofy?
Yeah.
It's not a cantina scene or anything.
I've never looked into it. Everyone has a separate letter, a different letter on their chest.
I think again, I don't know how this relates to the comic books necessarily, but I think that's like a family crest or whatever. So it gives more of an origin to his S instead of just hey, it stands for Superman. Like
Yeah, that's kind of what we call it. The Earthlings call him,
Mm-hmm.
but it has more depth here. Marlon Brando, man, looking powerful, and this is awesome. How just everyone's against him. And this is a few years before Tron. Tron kind of does similar sort of
Right.
glowing effects, so Superman's kind of raising the ante there. And
I always love the double hula hoops there. You can barely see too.
and how did they do that without CGI, dude? How did they do that? Tell us about that, That's part of the magic when, especially growing up during this age, when you're like, okay, there's no way. Like, how are they doing that? It's literally like a magician's trick. And that's what makes you even more
It's also
fascinating and excited.
his hair is a magician's trick too. Just getting that super curl just right on now.
Let's give big props to the makeup and hair design.
I mean, you can, and going back to just what we said a few minutes ago, just the whole idea of filming these back to back as one large movie. I mean, you could tell it was kind of, they probably went in a little too far considering that they didn't even finish the two movies and they had to bring in a different director. And
Yeah, call it Ego Wars or whatever, Vision Wars. Of course, Peter Jackson kind of perfected it with Lord of the Rings, just making back-to-back movies. But this is over 20 years before that, 30 years before that.
Give some credit to Back to the Futures Part 2 and 3.
Yeah, Zemeckis doing the first one, then that becomes a hit. Then okay, let's do. And I
Right.
guess you could say probably Empire and Jedi. They knew once the first one
once
was a
you
hit,
had the
they're
first
like-
one.
But the first movie is very much like, let's just make a full movie. We don't know if it's going to be a hit.
Right.
If it is, we commit.
You have the one minor cliffhanger, which, as a kid, I barely even registered that it was a
Right.
cliffhanger that Vader was alive.
And here we have 14 minutes, 20 seconds. We get a glimpse of Superman as a kid and his parents hanging out. This is just another great set. I mean, there's so much to be said for like really cool set design, making it feel like this strange world.
And you get the color motif.
the American flag.
Well, no, the yellow.
Oh, no, there's yellow in
way,
there. Their atmosphere will sustain him. I think it's really important, again, put yourself, when you're watching this, into the late 70s, even early 80s. For us growing up in the early 80s as kids watching this, being blown away by it. There is so much less availability of watching movies on video.
Right.
If you see Superman, you're probably not going to see it until the second. I mean, the second one will come out next year, and you may not have a chance to rewatch this first one.
Right.
So it's like you watch it when it's in the theater, and that's it. There's no VHS. There's no streaming. There's no kind of pressure on the filmmaker to
make it stand up to repeated viewings, or
to make it stand up to repeated viewings, to really not necessarily one up the other movies that are coming on, because you're not being so, the stacking isn't going on so quickly.
Right.
It's just like not a lot of movies are being released, and there's not a lot of availability for people to study them, and anybody can edit these movies down and nitpick. There's so many videos on YouTube now of just, you can find every flaw in every movie now.
And you wonder if some of these movies would have the same inflated reputation. Even something like Star Wars, would that have the same reputation if it came out later in a time when it can just be watched over and over, and then the plot holes become more obvious? It seems like every big hit movie still has this is what's wrong with this movie. This is what's wrong with the movie. Sometimes valid, but sometimes it gets a bit...
Are we, the audience, kind of like drug addict, and each movie is a hit that has less of a high for us because it's so easy to make it so big and spectacle, and we're just so used to it now. I mean, back then, this was a real stretch. "16 minutes, 40 seconds. We're getting an emotional, really hardcore emotional moment here.
Well, I don't know if it becomes lessened, because every time something comes out that really does the story right and everything, it still feels like a revelation, because there's so many movies that just try to rely just on spectacle, and that crutch doesn't work anymore, because okay, so we're seeing an entirely CGI world yet again. I mean, who cares at this point? I've seen it before.
Notice here, we're getting the great set pieces. We're getting some cool visuals, but it's really anchored in mom and dad sending son away, and they're just having this really intense moment right now, making us care about them.
Again, there's some things in this movie you probably can't do now that had the impact then and still have an impact, but it wouldn't work. And it's not even necessarily a bad thing that it wouldn't work, but just seeing, there's scenes where you just see him flying around for a bit, and it works in this movie, but if you did that now, it just wouldn't have the same kind of dramatic impact, because this was, like the ads at the time said, "You will believe a man can fly." Yeah. Now, we all believe men can fly. I mean, we believe men can do a lot more than fly. They can do bullet time or whatever.
Right. You will believe in bullet time.
Right.
So again, and looking at the effects, it still holds up in terms of watching him fly. You're like, yeah, that's pretty decent, even though you could make it a little more fancy with CGI now.
In terms of effects, in terms of the wow factor, is there anything beyond? Did we reach the peak with, say, Avatar? Is there anything left to actually have that spectacle in terms of visuals
to make us say, anymore? Wow, holy cow!
Right. I mean, Avatar, and before that was probably The Matrix.
Yeah.
The trailer comes out and we see the bullet time, and everybody's like, oh, what the hell is that?
Yeah, have to check that out.
I don't know if that's even possible anymore. I mean, once you've created an entirely CGI world with 3D cameras, I mean, I guess there's always the fourth dimension,
but now we're talking about the technology of it. While at heart, you still have to have that emotional story.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things I always, I'm a big fan of, is like, these movies were inventing the blockbuster structure, but they were written and made by people who came from that school of hardcore, emotional, good storytelling. Let's make it that first, and then we're going to make all this other stuff believable, where it's kind of more the reverse now.
I mean, there was no blockbuster structure, and I would say this movie doesn't follow blockbuster structure at all. Again, there's this stuff on the other planet, and then when he lands and he's about to go to Smallville, and then there's such a long quiet stretch, and and lasts for, again, I don't think you see Superman until maybe an hour and a half into the movie.
Being Superman.
Of this 2.5 hour movie. It seems it might be a little earlier than that, but that doesn't follow the structure where you need to hit certain pieces. You need to, okay, we need an action piece here, we need an action piece here, we need an action piece here.
Nicely
to keep
said.
people interested, I guess. I mean, this is a pretty elaborate. You're watching the destruction of a planet here.
And again, looks really great. Now everything's red, and we're getting kind of the Star Trek canted angles, and the ship's being attacked. But it really works, makes it believable.
Yeah.
And you bring up a really great point because it's let's say the organic nature of this story. We're going to just do what it needs. We're not going to be forced to say, we need something every 10 minutes to keep people excited and interested. We're going to let the story unfold based on the characters. And we get basically 2 setups. The setup of the Krypton, then setup of him in Smallville. So it's like 2 act ones kind of.
And you do get little pieces of him, you know. You get the little baby Superman picking things up. You got the super speed, but
the kicking the football and all that.
Right, but
you get teases. And
what it results in is that moment when you first see him in, you know, that moment when he first has the suit and just flies, and it lasts maybe 10 seconds, the shot, but and with the music and everything, it's a very powerful, very
that crescendo that just really gets you.
Very epic feeling.
And now it's kind of almost like when the Sam Raimi Spider-Man came out, and we get him finally swinging through the city for that first time. And now we get the amazing Spider-Man remake, and they kind of speed through, like, okay, he's done the skateboard, doing some things. Okay, let's just get through this, him discovering his powers. And we all know it's going to happen, and we're kind of like, yeah, whatever, let's just get to him already being Spider-Man. Versus here, where it's like, we enjoy the process a lot more.
Which makes sense in some... Because I really think that I was trying to come up with any others that fit this bill, but I really think that the Superman origin story is probably the only one that's necessary to film, because it's more about tone, it's more about thematic content. You can sum up the backstory of a lot of the other comic book superheroes in very quick scenes and you can shortchange it a lot. I mean, Batman Begins did it a different way, and that was solid. But all you really need to know is, you know, he watched his parents get killed. He's rich. He wants to have revenge. I mean,
yeah.
But the Superman story, it's not even. You could sum it up, but it's more about the feeling, the tone. He has to be the Americana, the growing up Americana. He's the best of us. You know, he has to have the upbringing, the classic good upbringing that actually makes him what he is, not just his powers.
The reason why he cares about saving people.
Right. Because he doesn't really have a set mission.
Right.
Necessarily. It's more just about this is who he is.
And his belief in what's been ingrained in him.
There's not like a specific moment that makes him want to be good. He just is good.
Yeah, there's no death of Uncle Ben.
Right. Even there's no death of Uncle Ben or parents dying or what have you.
This is a cool scene where at 23 minutes 14 seconds he's inside the star crib and shaking around. Nice filmmaking by Donner. And here we get some cool zooming point of view, and he's going to crash into America's heartland here. Off-screen flashes make us believe that a meteor has crashed. So again, nice low-budget kind of trickery there.
Right.
If we're thinking now about Zack Snyder directing a Christopher Nolan produced Superman, how are the expectations different from what it was 30 years ago? Now that we've had the Star Wars, the Matrixes, all the other Supermans, just this overload of just technology and sophistication of filmmaking, as a hardcore Superman fan,
well, it's gonna
what are you looking for, and what's its job now?
It's gonna have to have more action. Obviously, I mean, especially growing up. I mean, now I look at it and I see things a little bit different. But we got Superman crotch shot come up. There you go.
24 minutes, 30
full
seconds.
frontal nudity here, so things just got a little raw. But
that you're not going to see in today's because
no, I don't think
the 70s were a different time.
I don't think that's going to happen in the Zack Snyder version. So that's another thing about Superman that makes sense more on screen to me, is that the people who've played Superman have been, I mean, they've been in shape, but they haven't been like the bodybuilder type. And you see that in the comic books, he's like this, a lot of times he's this like bulky guy. And it doesn't really make sense because he doesn't, I mean, these are his powers. Why would he?
He doesn't need to work out.
Muscle. Or how could he work out? What's he gonna, what is he gonna use as resistance training? Like, what is, I mean,
the Earth isn't even enough, right?
He can, this is a guy who can push the moon around. Like, what's he lifting?
That's
what's he
a great
benching?
point. So Superman
I don't know why you need
cannot be ripped.
That's how I feel. It doesn't seem like Superman should really be buff.
Or does he have a standard metabolism that no matter what, the metabolism keeps him in a certain kind of a shape?
Perhaps. I mean,
Like
I'm sure there's fans who have come up with all the reasons why this needs
Was
to be.
it Wolverine that couldn't get drunk because his blood, he metabolized the alcohol? It was in one of the movies.
Possibly.
So here we have a classic cinema shot rate, 25 minutes, 55 seconds, baby Superman, toddler Superman.
This is something they came up with in terms of what fits the movie and the composition and everything. It's you can overdo it trying to do an iconic shot.
Yeah.
Like I remember in Superman Returns, Brian Singer, he kept doing trying to do that same iconic shot, and it gets a little like too obvious. There's a shot where he's like Atlas. They do the shot of the recreation of the famous Action Comics #1 cover where he's lifting the car. It gets a bit, you know.
But now back at this time, were they still kind of writing the film grammar for those kind of shots? Like, so that shot kind of was like what it needed to be, and did it become an iconic shot? But it didn't try to be an iconic shot.
Well, they probably did what they could too. I mean, it would probably be a lot harder to have him stand like picking up a car and just showing nothing around him.
And how'd you like those release forms? Like, hey, we're going to use your kid. We'll have the car lifted up on cranes and stuff, but he has to kind of go under it to make it look believable. Well, that's not going to happen today, you know? And we do a quick jump in time. So Superman, by the way, aged during his space trip, right? He was a baby.
Yeah, it was.
And
like
he came out of town.
It was like a 5-year type or 3-year journey or something like that.
And the music really helps carry that. We're watching it without the sound, but the music really captures that space travel and everything.
The other thing you can't pick up without the sound is a really weird thing that, again, probably wouldn't be done today, is that the young Superman is voiced over, it's Christopher Reeve.
Interesting.
I always thought it was a strange, until I learned that. It was like, how do they have the same voice?
Here we get another great, this is like the genre kind of set piece payoff. Another clue of Superman. I don't know how they did that football. Again, no CGI. What is that? Is that on a string? A helicopter? Yeah, it just keeps going. And then, so we're getting 3 scenes back to back. This third scene coming up where he starts testing his powers, discovering who he is.
Right.
Going through super puberty, essentially, at this point. Looking at it from now, you're kind of like, okay, well, that looks a little cheesy. But back then, this is like, whoa, how are they doing this? This looks cool. And this is a very Spielbergian kind of thing. It will become like the kid reaction to something.
Well, and then is it in this cut, or is it in the director's cut where that's actually Lois on the train? I forgot that.
Really?
I think it might be cut out in this one where she just says, like, you know,
so
shut
it's
up,
like
Lois, or something
like
that.
a star-crossed lovers
yeah,
kind of
one
thing.
of those things.
It's been the destiny for them to be together.
That's the problem, is that the extended edition was the one that came out on DVD first, so I've seen that more recently. So
okay,
there's some scenes in here that are missing, but for the most part, with good cause.
Get the shot of Superman. He just keeps running in the smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Smoke in the distance. And now they're establishing Superman in human form as the nerd who can't get the girls.
Right.
So the duo personality there. I always loved this moment as a kid, just watching this.
Mm-hmm.
And he has beat them there.
Without breaking a sweat, of course.
And we get a great reaction here. Very nice. The great comedy here. So Donner's doing a nice job of that, the comedic element, having some fun with the character.
You can't just have it all portentous and everything. I guess that's the one worry about the new Nolan produced movie, is that there is going to be perhaps a bit too heavy, realistic.
So they're gonna go more Batman-y with it in terms of
that. I think that's the worry, but I mean, early buzz seems to be that the initial trailer it's not nearly as serious or dark as the initial trailer would have you believe. So we'll see.
Okay. I'm trying to think of what to expect in the Zack Snyder, because this is a total reboot now that's coming out.
Yeah, we're getting an origin story.
Because the Bryan Singer one was
sort of
kind of a sequel.
Sequel to it was supposed to be the new Superman 3, I guess.
Okay, so from part 2 to 3.
Right.
So now, is it still possible in today's age to have Superman embody this Americana classic, good old hero, 1950s, 30s, believe in something true, believe in the American dream?
If they really
are we too sarcastic to buy that?
If they address it the right way, I don't think so. I think that's actually the perfect angle to take with this, but it has to come from a place of hope. It shouldn't be it's not the cynical,
right?
It's not the weirdly political like some of the Dark Knight stuff. It's just the theme should be painted in broad strokes, I would say.
Okay. But should Superman in human form have a little more of an edge? Should he be less naive or acting less naive? Should he have more of a... It almost seems like he needs to be more... Like, you can't believe Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers. Like, those kind of get made fun of nowadays. You know, that... It seems like there's that... a little bit of that innocence is gone, you know? So, I'm wondering, like, are they going to try to maybe upgrade him to be more of like not a sarcastic kind of a character, but someone who kind of like
wise ass
not a Generation X like slacker guy, but to have a little bit less of an idealism. That's kind of the battle for me, you know. And again, I think you're making some great points here in terms of...
I don't know. I think that's you can't make him less of an ideal. You can have him struggle with being that type of person, but you can't have a morally gray Superman. It just doesn't work.
Okay.
It's not...
Superman is the man who believes in these true things.
Yes.
And he's gonna be that no matter what.
Like I said, he's the ultimate hero. It goes back to an older inception of the comic book heroes. I mean, before Stan Lee and the comic book heroes who had their own personal problems. You know, Spider-Man dealing with girlfriends and all that
60s
stuff.
kind of...
Right. You just had... he was just supposed to be... He's made to be an icon, and I think you need to keep that.
"33 minutes 15 seconds. Superman's father, adoptive father, has died.
He expresses that he couldn't save him even with his powers. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
That he doesn't necessarily know he's this Superman at this point, but he knows that he's not like everyone else. And while he can do all these things, he was unable to save the person that he cared about the most at this point. And that's a really great little moment. And themes like that are what really need to be addressed just in any kind of these stories.
That's what'll ultimately lead him to the decision he makes at the end of the movie. So
when his father died here, he didn't know he could fly around the world.
Right. Well,
and
reverse
everything.
Everything, as he says, all his powers, you couldn't save him. So I think it's just he's not going to make the same mistake twice. I mean,
so when the same fate,
when an opportunity arises to be able to do that,
another person he loves very much dies. He's like, I'm going to do whatever it takes, to bring her back. And here, great shot looking out the window. This is a very thematic moment. One of the things lately in films, it seems like they want to move so quick. They want to kind of skip over these parts where characters take time to kind of explore themselves.
Right.
To have anything that has to do with like the inner... This is a visual representation when we get the glowing Krypton crystal.
Right.
That's kind of like a visual representation of the internal glowing within him. You know, it's something calling him.
Yes.
And that's what I hope and I wish that this new version is going to have moments like this, visual representations of this, because, you know, if you get something like A Good Day to Die Hard, it's the first Die Hard movie that's under 2 hours.
Okay.
And it's probably under 2 hours because there's 30 minutes missing of Al Powell talking to a character moments about what I'm going through.
Right.
We just get the great set pieces, which kind of weren't that great. But
set pieces and wisecracks. And
yeah, because it's made from the blockbuster point of view.
Right.
Where this is made from the filmmaking 70s, you know, the second golden age, just character-based dramas, and we're going to do it the right way.
There's an ambition to it. I mean, I would say there's no ambition to A Good Day to Die Hard. It's just, you know, we can throw this together. We know it's going to make some money. Let's do it.
Right. And so obviously we're hoping that the new Superman doesn't fall into that trap.
The little I've seen does seem like at least they're going for something. Whether they succeed or not is one thing, but at least they are going for something more resonant than, say, I don't know, Green Lantern.
So it looks great. It looks beautiful, which all Zack Snyder films have a great visual to them.
Right.
It seems like that he's a good choice to bring the visuals to life.
Some people, I mean, he can perhaps overuse the slow motion a bit. I mean, I know there's a lot of complaints about it. I think it works sometimes, especially, I think it works especially now, again, in the age of all the CGI. It kind of makes it gives it a little more weight.
Right.
And I much prefer something like that where it slows down to see the action as opposed to the hyperkinetic editing to make things look more furious than they are.
Which kind of Christopher Nolan movies fall into that a little bit. Some of the Batman fights are just like, what's going on? You know, even the next step. I don't really want to cause controversy by mentioning Michael Bay following Christopher Nolan, but Michael Bay might be the ultimate in Transformers, where you don't know what's going on with those fights. So
no idea.
There's a nice... Snyder's very good about, like, in 300 or whatever movie, if there's a fight, you know what's going on. You feel each punch, each hit. Yeah. And that, like you're saying, that seems like it's right.
It can go too far. I mean, 300, that was... I mean, yeah, you felt every hit, and then it just kept happening and happening and happening for a full hour, so...
This is another great visual. They're in the foreground. He's talking with his mom. And notice how much she's aging, and he's kind of not aging as fast. But the background is like the old life.
Right.
You know, it's kind of chimney smoke. It's kind of like the death. And it's time for him to move on. It's time for him to go to the next phase.
And as much as we said, you know, you don't get to the actual Superman stuff for about an hour. This is well paced. I mean, they're hitting all the moments you need to see in his coming of age, I guess. But,
yeah.
And it's not overly long.
It's a great...
They could have had a whole, you know, romantic subplot or something like that when he's growing up, right? You're just seeing everything you need to see.
And there's a little moment there where he kind of wanted the high school girl, but she wanted to go with like the football guy. But we get the sense, okay, he's not necessarily the ladies' man, and there's something bigger calling to him. He has to. There's some adventure awaiting him. This is just a nice shot of them by themselves in the field here. And the music, again, as we're watching this, we're missing a lot of the little scoring by John Williams that really picks up more of the emotional cues.
Yes.
You know, every death, every looking out the window, just those little touches that John Williams does.
And we get we have the color motif still. I mean, he's always wearing red or something, which is a nice little... Well, I mean, it's been copied a lot since then.
We got to remember that nothing like this had been done before. So it was a challenge to create the language for it. But now the challenge for Snyder and company is, because there's so much of it out there,
right?
How do you take the best of it, but now separate it from all that. There's obviously a set here, but it looks pretty cool. "39 minutes 40 seconds."
Skip right to him in the North Pole, so
Just
there is economy here of storytelling.
He hasn't discovered his powers of flying. Obviously, he's still
Right.
walking. I guess he could run faster, take big leaps. And this is just the classic sort of character discovering who he is journey, who he's supposed to become.
Right. Well, a lot of which we see it actually happens off screen, but it's something we don't need to see. We just know that he learns all of his history and ages another 10 years, and
Really works well. The horizon's very nice. "40 minutes 34 seconds." Throws it super far, and here we're gonna get the Fortress of Solitude. How did they do that without CGI? So if this movie was screened for a studio boss or head, anyone who's gonna agree to release the picture, are they saying cut anything at this point? We're 41 minutes into it, and there really hasn't been. There's no opponent really. There's no drama necessarily happening on screen. People aren't fighting with each other. It's much more of just, hey,
Right.
here's over an hour of me becoming Superman.
My cynical side would say that about maybe 10-15 minutes ago, before his father dies or something, there'd be like, I don't know, something where he foils a crime, like secretly, without
Okay.
anybody knowing that it's actually him or something, or saves somebody from a wreck or something like that right in the middle there,
Because we
just
have
to give a little bolster of excitement, I guess, instead of shots of farms and
there's like over 100 episodes of Smallville that now you have to go on top of this. So this is really creating the Superman mythos still. Really cool visuals here again. "41 minutes 54 seconds. It's really great how this Fortress of Solitude's coming together. And it just creates more mystery for us. Like, we want to see him go in there. What's the result going to be?
right.
So as a kid, do you remember the feelings kind of that the first time you saw it, or what made you kind of watch this over and over? What were the things that kind of stuck out for this?
The ones that stick out is part 2 probably more, at least in terms of a kid, because you get the whole big fight scene in the middle of downtown or whatever, which again was at the time, and which, as in terms of like hero fights, probably wasn't topped for a long time, even though the effects were better and then the visuals are better, and there's some cheesy moments in there. In terms of actual, that's what we've been waiting to see in all these movies for so long, is like these superpowered individuals going at it, and a lot of movies didn't really deliver on that. None of the first go around of Batman movies really delivered on something like that. So that was the standard, I'd say, until about Spider-Man 2. So
Yeah, and then we got the ultimate of that, which was Avengers, where you
Right.
get every major character having their moment.
yeah, Avengers was exactly what we've all wanted, I think, since they started making these big budget comic book movies. So
I'm right there with you. I remember every time Superman 2 was on cable or whatever, it was just like, I want to watch that. It felt like it was like a 50-minute battle. And when he throws the guy through the Coke sign and all that, it's just
you
like,
get
it's so
thrown
cool.
through signs, and you get cars exploding, and you get everything you want to see.
And more than anything, I wish somehow that this new Superman can bring that feeling back. Just like that, wow, this is effing cool.
And that's something they've never gotten to do with Superman, because they've Superman 2, obviously, but then they never really gave him an opponent like that. I guess they tried in Superman 4, but the less said about that, the better.
Well, maybe we'll get to it. If we do the entire saga, we can kind of knock it out one week or so.
We can have a few drinks and watch Superman 4.
Superman 4 will be more of a Mystery Science Theater, possibly, than a kind of a breakdown.
Yes.
Here we get the father returning. 44 minutes, 30 seconds. Activated the crystal, and now he's kind of going to get the...
We get the competing fathers, basically.
The father that he grew up with.
Right.
Now here's the one that he didn't remember, but who he's made up of.
Again, that's his ultimate decision at the end, is who is he. He weighs the opinions of his two fathers and decides which one is the one that he wants to be. So
now, is that something that you're picking up on in the films, or is that more kind of from comic book? Or...
Well, that's something I pick up from the film. I don't know how much that's used in the comic book. I know they did that in the television show Smallville, which I watched some amount of. But that's something you pick up in the film, because again, I mean, it's not that abstract. I mean, he's literally hears the voice of both of them telling him what to do and chooses one. But
now we go into the eye.
Right. Now we get a repeat of the credits, which
essentially the same thing, right?
This would probably be cut.
Okay, so it's like we're doing it again.
Right. We've seen the going through space thing.
By comparison, this is almost like a ADD version of the 2001 space flight, where like that.
Right.
2001 kind of seems slow, so 10 years later we're going to do this and it seems way faster. But 30 years later, this is just like, come on, all right, we get it. But this ad does.
I guess he's learning everything about everything that they possibly know.
But at the same time, now again, the John Williams score is under this, and it's just really, for the time, it just pulls you along the journey with Superman.
I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. This year we will examine. I mean, I guess he's here for about 10 years,
spanning 28 known galaxies.
Right.
So Superman is literally the smartest man on Earth, also.
And I guess they do make him intelligent in these movies. I don't know if that's it's a constant character trait or not. I'm not sure, but
he doesn't come off as like the most super intelligent guy.
Right. And there's some of the later revisions of comic books have definitely not stuck to that. Whenever you have the whole Batman versus Superman type deal, Batman's the smarter, more savvy one and all that, which I don't know. Batman's definitely the more popular hero now.
Yeah.
He's...
Well, hopefully DC is sure wishing that they can get Superman right, so he can kind of...
So that they can make their terrible Justice League movie.
Now, by the way, this is over like a 2-minute speech here. Forty-seven minutes, 35 seconds. We're still going through space.
Here's the moment. We get the music. We get this cool ice mask effect for whatever reason.
And boom. And now, so we just went through his whole journey of education. And now he's dressed up and he's flying right now. And how bad? Right at the camera. How badass is this?
And this is the shot they choose to show him. There's not even a close-up of him or anything. It's just...
That's who he is.
Flying. So 48 minutes into the movie. That's when we first see Superman in the suit.
So it took 48 minutes to get him in the suit.
An entire hour-long television episode, basically. It was.
And yeah, I would say that today we in the audience might not have enough patience for the way that they did it here.
Yeah, I would say I don't think they'll probably not do that in the Snyder one, but I do think some lesser filmmakers will probably maybe do this in flashback or something, so we see him right away and then we go back.
The end result is the reason we care about this franchise is because of this first 48 minutes. It's when we were watching part 3 and 4, no matter how bad they are, we're remembering this setup. It's within us, and that's why we care about this character. And it's so necessary because it creates a success, but then later, when you look at it from like a marketing perspective, you want to cut it out.
Right.
Because you're concerned about the effects of it.
And now we're meeting the other characters who are iconic characters, but they're not showing up until this part of the movie. I mean, I think you might now is to just not even introduce most of your major players again until halfway through.
We've basically been with one character for 48 minutes. And now it's like, okay, we're basically setting up another Act 1 right now.
It's almost like another movie.
It's another movie,
like
essentially.
You just started another movie.
So we had basically 2 small mini movies with no real dramatic conflict, just character thematically growing and exploring himself. And now
we get
another movie starts.
We get the Clark Kent persona.
And Christopher Reeve, he was talking about born to play a role.
Oh yeah.
Like, just, was it a mistake for Singer to go with the Superman? Should they be trying to make Superman look like Christopher Reeve? Or is that how the character looks in the comic book and you should stick with that?
It's some of both, I guess. I mean, Singer was too reverent towards the originals. I think that was the biggest flaw. I don't know if the casting was necessarily bad. I thought Ruth did a decent job, so I think the reverence showed up too much in more of the other. I mean, repeating the same plot basically as the first one was a bit much, and not upping the stakes at all. I mean, when you do Superman Returns and he's again going after Lex Luthor, there's no
same old thing.
There's no real. It doesn't feel like enough of a threat.
Right.
And then you have the sequence of him stopping random crimes. They needed to up the stakes.
And since it technically wasn't a reboot, we wanted to continue the journey forward. And that'll be another one of the challenges. They're doing the reboot, so they have the permission to go back to the origin, do it quickly.
The one thing I have not seen, and it did not show up in the trailers at all, and really I've not seen anything about, is how they're going to portray Clark Kent in this new one. Because this portrayal was kind of the standard for the longest time. I don't know. Again, Clark Kent was not necessarily a bumbling type of like awkward guy. He was just a regular guy.
Right.
And Christopher Reeve kind of made this work. That's the way you have to do in the movies, because you have to make it a little more believable that people would not know who this guy is. I mean, that's something that can come across on the page a bit more, but here, if it was just if he acted normal but just had glasses, it would probably wouldn't work. He has to be the opposite in a lot of ways.
There probably weren't a lot of the reviews that said everyone believes that he's Clark Kent just because he has his glasses on.
Right.
Like, you kind of just accepted it. But nowadays, this is going to be pointed out. So you're going to have to justify with, like, he has, again, some kind of aura or something that makes people entranced when he has just this little change to him or something.
He's basically playing 2 roles because they're very different. They're very differently played. And the ability to do that, to do both roles, is what makes it believable.
And we have to really
He's not playing them as though they're the same person.
Right. And Christopher Reeve, let's give him credit for having this great comedy kind of ability to make him sell this bumbling character.
He's great as Clark Kent.
And there's some moments in part 2, because he's taking his glasses off a lot in that one. Mm-hmm. And when he takes it off and he goes in a Superman pose, like, he transforms right there in just one shot. From nerdy, pretending not to have any confidence, to just, hey, I'm Superman. And you buy it.
Taking off the glasses is like, Stallone turning the hat around and over the top. It's like a switch.
Now you gear up. 53 minutes, 29 seconds. We get a little mini dramatic moment here where they're getting robbed.
Right.
This is a 70s thug.
I mean, how many muggers wear turtlenecks?
With like the plaid suits. Right. And this is great because he has to not save the day.
Right.
In order to maintain his identity.
Yeah, he saves the day without giving up his identity at all, which is...
And he's just selling it really well.
And you get the impetuous Lois, too. This establishes her character pretty well.
Oh, and she's... Here we go. Look at that. Nice slow-mo little moment. Margot Kidder and Karen Allen are almost the same. They play kind of similar characters back in the
there's
because
some-
Karen
there's
Allen
some-
was Raiders of the Lost Marion,
Right, Marion, yeah.
and there's kind of a similar thing going on. I wish that Kristen Stewart would have watched some Superman because I think she could have been like the new Margot Kidder. When I was rewatching these, I was like, it seems like Kristen Stewart was kind of trying to do something like this character, but Margot Kidder had a little more spunk and energy to the way she delivered her characters.
Yeah, she needs some more of that. I mean,
but it's a very similar kind of build, you know, like career advice for Kristen Stewart. Watch some Margot Kidder from the late 70s, early 80s.
I think Amy Adams has the quality that works too.
She's going to be in the new one, right?
She's Lois.
She's Lois. Yeah, I haven't done any preview reviews yet for it, so I don't know all the factors to it.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting introduction to the opponent, so we're starting to get a little hint.
Right.
Ned Beatty. Again,
we get the sidekick of Lex Luthor. From what I know in the comics, this is not a very canonical portrayal of Lex Luthor, but it works. I mean, Gene Hackman.
And we're talking about Ned Beatty, Gene Hackman, two guys who have starred in some of the most recognized, awarded films of the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Ned Beatty, Network, Deliverance, Gene Hackman, French Connection, The Conversation. We're talking about Donner saying, hey, I want to have great actors in this movie, and we're really going to take it seriously. We're going to make it fun, but we're not going to camp it up. We're not going to do kind of like this Michael Bay thing. Again, not to rag on him too much, but this attitude of like, oh, it's just a bunch of guys that can transform or characters that fly around. Let's just make it fun and that's it. No, let's have a little bit of humanity to these characters. It's really important. Why we care. Why we laugh.
We get the little Starsky and Hutch routine here. This is also different than 90% of the movies that come out now, is that there's no origin story for the villain. He just is.
He just is who he is.
Right. And it's kind of surprising that that template wasn't followed at all. I mean, pretty much are there any other comic book superhero movies where they don't show the origin of the villain? He just...
We just kind of...
Yeah.
I show up and I am kind of who I am.
Right. Or he's just been established as this is...
Well, if we're talking about Spider-Man, right, it's always he was a scientist and his creation turned him into something. That's a good point.
I mean, every one of the original, at least the original Batman movies, had the villain origin story, because those movies end up being more about the villain than Batman himself.
Right. I guess Scarecrow in the Batman Begins, he kind of just is this tormented guy.
Yeah, and Joker too. I mean, yeah, they did it with the...
Ra's al Ghul, you get some backstory though.
Right. They didn't actually show him decide to become the Joker. He just is. So
right. But even a Hannibal Lecter, I mean, they kind of, later in the movies they kind of go into it, but it's like he's just a psychologist who kind of was just evil. He just used his genius for very bad things. Here we get a nice little moment here. I always loved as a kid, like anything that had like layers or like cool little compartments,
anything
right?
Goonies-like.
Anything Goonies-like, even though this is before Goonies.
Right.
But it is from the director of Goonies. So...
That is one of the cool things they cut out. Probably the only part that's in the director's cut that I do like is that there's just the extra... When Superman finally goes to Lex Luthor's lair, there's an extra bit of like a gauntlet that he goes through. I mean, there's like a tunnel of fire or whatever that he walks through.
So kind of
things like that.
Lex Luthor did have some security to it.
Yeah, there's just a little bit more of the, here's Superman doing some cool stuff to make his way there.
And I think again,
but again, it's unnecessary to the story, so that's probably why they cut it. It was a little bit of a excess, I guess.
Here we get the shot of how bad of a man Lex Luthor is. 59 minutes, 16 seconds. He kills the cop.
Right.
All we had was the finger. That's like a Dr. Claw, right? Is that the Inspector Gadget character before Dr. Claw? So now we know that Luthor is not a nice man.
Yeah, and I mean he's played as kind of a charismatic type, I guess, Hackman, but there's a menace to him too, and you don't get that in a lot of the other. It's kind of just there's lip service paid to it, but there's not actual. It doesn't feel as dangerous, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe that's just me, but I don't. You don't get the same danger out of Green Goblin or Doctor Octopus or.
Do any of those recent opponents? Do we actually see them like kill anybody or do anything?
You just see. I know Green Goblin did because he had the bombs or whatever, but it's so comic booky. Like, he throws the pumpkin bombs or whatever, and they turn into skeletons and are dead.
Okay.
And it's like, I mean, it works, but
this moment was a little more.
He's very villainous in this. I mean, he's more villainous than the Kevin Spacey version.
Sure. And let's talk about the good old 70s code of showing the opponent's lair, but also the female that he has, and she's showing her superpowers. And this was kind of something that, hey, why not? It's the 70s, there's plenty of XXX movie theaters everywhere, so the times were changing, and there's a little bit of a sexuality going on here, which you don't see a lot.
There's a bit of a James Bond quality to this.
Good point here.
The villain with his lair.
Because arguably, James Bond was the superhero franchise, being a human kind of guy, that if you want to go big, if you want to have set pieces, that's probably the franchise that you got to say, they kind of set the standard at this point in the 70s, 60s. Talking about big set pieces, intricate plots, big bad guys. So I'm sure that Donner's probably looking at some of those movies and saying, okay, let's kind of Superman as James Bond and Lex Luthor as Goldfinger or whoever, and let's take some things from that. This great idea, the layer underground. And now we're spending a lot of time, because we had so much with Superman, let's really establish the character, not his backstory, but who he is and what his plan is.
Right. Because
now, again, we're establishing a new Act 1. We're going to have this mini, hour and 20-minute movie because we had a 48-minute two-part movie. And so now we're getting that, okay, here's the opponent that is eventually going to clash with our hero, who our hero doesn't know about just yet.
The obsession with real estate that didn't work in the first attempt at a reboot with Superman Returns. I don't know, I think it makes more sense in this time frame. That seemed like it would probably be rote now, especially with the climate of nowadays. I think the greedy wants to buy things type villain is maybe a bit on the nose now. Yeah, so I don't know.
The same thing. Anything with kind of nuclear weapons and stuff. It's like
if Man of Steel does well and we get the inevitable sequel and they do bring in a Lex Luthor type, I wonder what kind of angle they'll have with him.
Right.
If it'll be more the businessman type or the politician, which they've done in the comics as well.
Right.
Which angle they'll take with that.
And it is, I think, David S. Goyer and Jonathan Nolan that are writing the new Superman.
I think it was just Goyer.
Just Goyer?
It might be from a story by the Nolans.
Okay. So again, got that recent Batman Origins kind of thing. So they've been really good about being kind of pretty inventive or trying to make it current, and they're doing that Person of Interest show on CBS, so that they're kind of in touch with kind of the new times. So thankfully, hopefully, they won't be reusing the villain plans from movies gone by. But now we cut to some more kind of heart of the story here, where it's the relationship between Clark and Lois. 1 hour and 4 minutes. Interesting. By today's standards, would we believe that she would enchant him so much? Do we need... Amy Adams is now the new Lois, right? So Lois was never meant to be kind of like a supermodel by any means or anything like that, right?
No, I mean,
Just a strong woman.
I mean, if you look at the comic books, I mean, every female in comic books is ridiculously gorgeous, of course, because that's...
Who played her in the Bryan Singer one? She was kind of...
Kate Bosworth.
Okay, so Kate Bosworth definitely a little more of a...
Right, but she didn't have the same, like, presence.
That's a great point. That's a really important point.
Which I think, obviously, you have a multiple Academy Award nominee in Amy Adams. I think you'll have a little bit more of a fully realized character there. You talk about Marlon Brando in this, and Gene Hackman and Ed Beatty. I mean, the new one has one of the more stacked casts of one of these new movies that you can think of. Dozens of Oscar nominations and wins between everybody. So
great. Hopeful.
You almost wonder if it's too overstuffed, but
because that doesn't necessarily guarantee. Because
Right.
there's been a lot of movies recently where you get a really nice cast,
right.
but if the material isn't there, if the story, if the heart isn't there, you can dress it up all you want. They're just going to be,
But again, they're trying to. I think with the choices, they are trying to add gravity to it. When you think of somebody who could bring that same kind of quality that Brando has, I mean, Russell Crowe's not the worst choice in the world. Just for that kind of...
I can buy him as a...
That, bigger than life almost type thing.
Yeah.
He can pull that off. And the casting in the new one seems really well done. So
Son of Jor-El.
Yes.
Jor-El. Now here, because the conflict hasn't started with the main opponent of Luthor, we're having these mini episodes of momentary conflict to allow us to see Superman kind of saving the day in action a little bit.
This is the meeting of Lois and Superman. I mean, it's an important moment. And I mean, this is really the introduction of Superman, which is almost exactly halfway through the movie. I mean, we had the brief flying to the camera shot, but again, after that, it was another 20 minutes before you see him again.
Yeah. Good point that you mentioned there wasn't a close. You kind of could almost want a close-up the very first time he flies like that. It's almost like they missed that little shot.
Well, I think it was more of a... Again, it was a little bit of tease, just,
Tease. Okay. Good point. And so now, like you're saying, we're technically not halfway through the movie. And we are seeing the first time Superman does anything heroic and saves anyone.
Right. This is his coming out, if you will.
So this is actually a nice little trivia question. What was Superman's first act of heroism in the movie version? He saved Lois Lane from the helicopter. Nice filmmaking here. We cut... It's like shot of the helicopter, shot of the crowd down there, and then close up on Lois.
Waiting for this moment.
And let's see how he reacts here.
A nice little meta callback there, real quick.
Because he always went into the phone booth.
Yeah, the phone booth.
Great low angle shot there. Tension here as she's slipping. This is what I always remember here when he pulls That's such an icon. Right there. Boom. That's it.
The iconic moment.
And there it is.
And then you get the little humorous moment.
That's hilarious.
That's a bad outfit.
There's a super flag going on. So 1 hour, 8 minutes, 50 seconds. And the music's just totally pumping you up right now. And here we go.
You get the peril music, and then it kicks in right when he catches her.
So, such a crescendo. Bam. Close up, there it is. And just, Christopher Reeve just selling it. Coming together so well.
No strings.
Yeah, you buy it. And now the excitement starts. You know, now people are going to start finding out about him. He's going to...
Oh, he can fly. That's great. But can he pick up a helicopter?
Can you save the girl and the helicopter? Awesome. And that's just like us in the audience right there cheering.
Mm-hmm.
Again, put ourselves back when this came on the theater. There aren't a lot of theaters in America at this time. You're talking about maybe 1,000 screens or so. There's no multiplexes. So if Superman's playing, you're waiting in a line. It's not playing 10 times a day. And so you just start to hear the word of mouth of this. If you leave the theater feeling like, oh, that was great, you're seeing it right away again. Mm-hmm. It's a totally different time. When going through a film like this, it really helps to kind of almost transport ourselves into the body of someone and mindset of someone watching it back then.
And you get this whole Boy Scout kind of persona, just calls everybody gentleman and miss.
From the Tao of Steve film. How do you pick up girls? Do something excellent in her presence and then leave. Superman does that right now, and now you have her. She's pretty much got the crush on him right at this moment. Right? There you go.
Who wouldn't? And now we just get the flying, like...
Believable. Great shot.
There's a bit of the... just a momentary, like, self-satisfied shot. It seems like, yeah, I'm Superman. It's pretty awesome.
Great angle. Look at that. Wonderfully done. 1 hour, 10 minutes, 55 seconds. Just the music again. You're soaring with Superman emotionally. And if you're a little kid watching this, you're just like, Superman's a badass. I love this.
And he gets to be cool too. I mean, he's not boring.
Right.
I mean, this little moment here is playful and awesome.
Because Luthor's theme and Beatty's theme is much more of a kind of like hijinks shenanigans theme.
Well, I think Beatty has his own theme, if I recall. I mean, we're doing this without sound, but he has that kind of that oboe.
Well, like the Goonies Data kind of thing almost.
Right.
You know, like here's some funny things that are going to happen. Now Superman starts going on a roll of just saving the day.
And he's having fun with it too. I think that's important to note that this is really his first time getting to be.
Yes, nicely said.
Superman, and
It almost reminds me of what they did with The Amazing Spider-Man. There's that moment when he's in the back of the car and the guy's stealing it.
I haven't not seen the new Spider-Man.
You're not missing too much.
Okay.
But they tried to make him more of a wisecracking kind of kid.
Right.
And Superman's kind of doing that. Like, as he's stopping the burglar, he has like a little one-liner first. And to get back in this time, that hadn't really been established. The one-line kind of superhero, like, make a joke before you do something. Or like, if you go to Nightmare on Elm Street, it's Freddy Krueger, make a joke, then kill somebody kind of thing. You know, that hadn't happened yet in the grammar of filmmaking for these different franchises and blockbusters. It hadn't really been set up this way. So now, third straight scene, we're getting, again, this is something that this film established, and now Raimi picks up in Spider-Man and all the following superhero movies start doing
definitely,
this kind of
stuff. The scene in Spider-Man, definitely the car chase that he gets involved in.
Right. So now the challenge again for Snyder and company is, how do you do this in a fresh way? How do you do this without making it feel like mandatory montage of establishing powers? The recommendation might be, well, just make it emotional. Make it something that seems natural. And
that was actually probably the best part of Superman Returns, was that they didn't need the crime fighting montage, because they had the reintroduction of him with saving the shuttle or whatever. The plane shuttle, which was really well done and exciting and everything. That was going bigger, and then to have that, and then just have running around fighting bank robbers just seemed a bit like a letdown after that.
Yeah,
I mean, so they can do something similar to that, like stopping a natural disaster type thing, or a wreck or something like that.
Imagine the camera shut off. Superman is still going to be saving people and stopping bad guys in certain situations. So now when you turn the camera on, you probably want to film that moment that's a little bit bigger than normal.
Yeah.
You don't want to just see him do the little thing.
I mean, this works here again because he's just establishing himself. But if you do it in the movie, in the new one, again, you want to just do something that's a bit more... You don't want to have him doing things that, the police can do.
Good point. And I like the comedy here. Like, sure, it was a big bird, or he was in how these cops are interacting with.
Right.
It's very blue collar kind of just that.
I like the little thing which you barely even notice, but the boat is in the street.
Right.
He obviously just brought the boat there.
Like that, again, that's not CGI.
Like,
There's a boat in the middle of the street.
Right. And it's just
I like that line. Mooney, the first bottle's on me. And now it goes down to he's saving a cat from a tree, right?
Why not?
look, that was a moving zoom on a cat.
Like, if you're gonna go big, you gotta always go big.
That's it.
And here's a total wouldn't happen now. If you listen to this, she says, "Molly, this man comes out," and then you hear the kid getting slapped.
Stop telling lies.
And then you hear the slap. It's like, yeah, you probably wouldn't have the child abuse played for laughs now.
Or then he comes back, and then he takes the parents to DCFS and Superman, you broke my home up because. Now, this was kind of a moment that was in Superman Returns, right? Where he kind of saves a plane a little bit. It's
a little more epic than just basically like taking the place of an engine here. But
this is literally just the montage of Superman being an awesome guy.
Right.
Saving everybody.
Everywhere at once, kind of.
We established Lex Luthor. So he's off kind of... He showed the newspaper. Here's his plan. He's off screen doing what he wants to do. And now we're getting 10 minutes of what we've been waiting over an hour for.
I completely forgot that this was supposed to be Air Force One too. I always
thought
it was just a plane, which is fine enough, but of course it's got to be Air Force One as well.
There we go. Oh yeah, United States of America. There it is. And just again, the music at this point swelling. That's a classic shot there. I always like that.
Yeah,
one.
and this is
nice Superman salute.
I always like the delivery from the pilot here. Which, yeah.
Nice. And Donner having fun with it at the same time. You know, I mean, it's not super serious. And so now we go bigger, so we're seeing kind of like the Iron Man or Avengers thing where we see the media and everyone's finding out about him.
So the old school people watching the TV through the
store window. Through the store window. It's just so weird to look at. I mean, now literally television's in your pocket.
Now it would be a bunch of people watching YouTube.
Yeah. Well, with Kick-Ass, they kind of did that.
Yeah, and they did that in, what was it, Chronicle has some of that type of thing. So.
Right. Again, more little bit of the sexuality here. Mm-hmm. And they have a pool. The color green. It's a little foreshadowing of kryptonite and all that. So now we got our montage of random people that Superman fought against. Mm-hmm. And we cut back to who will be the major villain for him, going forward with his plans. And that tone of, it's menacing, but at the same time, it's like the shenanigans kind of having fun hijinks, not super serious.
Right. And also establishing why, for whatever reason, Lex Luthor isn't bald here. I don't know if Hackman just didn't want to shave his head or wear a skull cap the whole time. I don't know.
I do remember something from the producer's commentary where they mentioned like that Hackman just didn't want to do it, or he felt like it kind of took power away from the character. I remember growing up just like Gene Hackman is Lex Luthor. Yeah. Every time you see him in whatever movie, he's that guy. But you grow up and you're like, oh, he was like all these badass movies from the 70s and 60s. It flies. So here we kind of have, at this point when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about J. Jonah Jameson.
Right.
But kind of parallel sort of, I guess first it was done in the Superman comic.
Well, yeah. And he's not quite the same character. And it'd be interesting. Lawrence Fishburne is Perry White in the new movie.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So. Okay. So they do that. It does have a stack cast. Very nice.
Yeah.
And look, just Christopher Reeve just playing how he's just transformed into this meek, nerdy character.
He's got the bit of the stutter and.
Again, I'm totally not going to be able to forget that now. That point you made that he shouldn't be ripped. I mean, he's just, he's got super metabolism again. That's
right.
Now we've both read All-Star Superman, the comic.
Yeah.
So that was a good example of a little bit of a. He's played much more intelligent in that one, and much more human, kind of in terms of battling between his ideals and
Yeah, and it's very much, but it's also very much the more classic comic booky Silver Age type thing, where it's a little more fantastical. There's a lot of, I mean, most of that you couldn't do in a film, I don't think now, because people want that little bit more realism. I think there's a point where you reach. I think you can reach a point where it just becomes too unrelatable.
Right.
But when you have an entire CGI world or something like, again, I haven't actually seen it, but from the things I picked up from, like, say, Green Lantern, where it's just this entire like almost like cartoony,
too much, or like a Sucker Punch or something. Like, if you go too much into it. One of the great things about practical effects here for this is that it feels so grounded.
Yeah.
And notice,
and all the movies, all the really successful movies lately have been staying with that. Like the Iron Man and even the Avengers is still grounded in a recognizable place.
Right.
Which again, not to go on too much of a tangent, it's an interesting risk they're going to take in what is it, 2 years? They're doing that Guardians of the Galaxy movie, which is. It's like Marvel's version of just being really outlandish like that.
Okay.
With characters that most people in the public would have no clue who they are.
So why not? Why not push it out?
I guess when you're doing as well as they can afford to take a gamble like that.
Yeah. Hopefully they're saving their money, and if they can, why not take a risk? Do something that is not proven in the market.
Right.
And maybe by surprise we'll reward them for it. That's what we like.
And here's Superman diagnosing. Whether somebody has lung cancer or not.
Wouldn't he just do the X-ray vision and be like, stop smoking. You have lung cancer. I'm going to heal it right now.
Yeah, super doctor as well.
But this is, again, the 70s, so everyone's smoking. It's going back then and kind of being the dude who's like, smoking's bad for you. You kind of be laughed at a little bit.
Yeah, he's just set up as this completely ideal man here.
Mm-hmm. So 1 hour, 22 minutes, 25 seconds. We got our furthering the opponent's motivation moment. And now we're cutting back to Superman in a thematic moment again. Thematic / romance. There's no drama. There's no conflict. He's moving forward with Lois Lane.
We get a little joke there, but...
Yeah. Hey, come on. 225.
Super in all ways.
You got to build the romance. You got to have that love interest going on.
Oh, there's definitely a tension that you don't get a lot in the more modern hero movies.
I remember this growing up as one of the more memorable kind of iconic pairings, right? Just that at them as a couple. Upcoming, we're going to have a really great moment when they're flying together. And that we have to have this because we want the impact of the death later.
Well, it also, they have the chemistry, but it also feels like a budding romance between adults. I mean, granted, Spider-Man's supposed to be a teenager in early college years or whatever, but they're a lot more broad, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great point. That in the last 30 years, films in general have tended to go younger. Yeah,
younger. I mean, this just feels like a specific connection between these two instead of just kind of hitting the standard romantic beats.
Because here, you feel like their ages are in their 30s. Now in this new one, does it feel like they're kind of going? I know Amy Adams
looks like they're in their 30s.
Is young 30s as well.
Right.
But are they trying to sell it more as a 20s? By her asking the questions, it's just a very easy way to kind of a little more characterization, a little more. Here's kind of what he thinks. Look at that this very specific curl, right? Curl in the hair. That's one of the classic images. There must be a reason for you to be here. There it is. Classic truth, justice, and the American way. Like, by saying that line in 2013, if that's in the movie, I don't know. I think the audience will laugh at that. I think the audience would be like,
much like she does here. I mean, he kind of convinces her in a way. He sells her on it. Do
we, as a society now, need Superman more than ever? Do we need him to be the one to say that in the film and to make us believe it?
I think that's something I hope that the new film addresses. I won't get it stated so bluntly. I mean, I'm not going to say specifically I fight for the American way. I mean, like, I hope not. I don't think it works.
Well, it's like, how come he could say it? So is it definitely just a sign of the times that he could say it back then, but he can't say it now? That's kind of where we're at, because we're more global as a world or something. It's just truth, justice, and the human way, the earthly way.
We'll see how they decide to what their thematic statement will be.
Yeah, because it seems like movies are afraid to make those kind of statements nowadays. That movies don't really have. You don't want them to be thesis papers on societal problems. They're entertainment, but at the same time, if Superman represents a certain ideology or a certain belief system, and Lex Luthor represents a different belief system, or Zod represents this belief system, well, then you want them to battle against each other. You don't want just some physical bodies empty of any kind of mental or spirit. Right. You want that clashing of ideas. Now, this is, again, John Williams' score just taking us along with them on this flight at this moment. It's romantic, it's heroic, it's cinematic, all of it.
Yeah, it probably doesn't need the voiceover, but
I guess when you touch Superman, your body magnetizes so your feet go up. Like, he doesn't have to hold her feet up. Like,
if he's just that strong. He's just that
strong by holding her muscle, all the muscles firm up. So it's like, I guess that works. And right there, that obviously looks a little bit dated in terms of the effects.
It still works.
Yeah. And this is the magic of the movies. You will believe a man can fly.
And you'll notice, really, this movie is not. It by its very nature, it has moments that appeal to kids, the younger kids, but it's not actively going for that in any way. Again, as a kid, I enjoyed these, and again, the second one too, which actually did court that audience a bit more. But it's not really pushing that at all. It's definitely meant for everyone. It's meant for adults. Nothing in there that's kind of just pushing towards that little goofiness, which you get sometimes.
It's not like playing down to or playing for.
No. Well, again, you get that moment right before they take off, where he says Peter Pan was for children.
That's a great line.
Fairy tales, right?
And that kind of cloud moment is very much a Peter Pan-y kind of thing. One hour, 28 minutes, 50 seconds. As they're separating.
I never understood. I never. I never decided whether. I always wondered if he dropped her on purpose, which I mean, it doesn't really go with the character, but.
Well, but
he's kind of
maybe he kind of knows the moves to make, and he wants to play with the emotions and get a little excitement going.
It's a bit manipulative for him. But
let's see. Yeah, it seems like he's kind of doing it. Look, he's letting.
I think he's just more like
hands gripping. Again, so powerful. I touch your fingers, and you can. Let's see. Yeah. Why? Oh,
no, he's holding on.
But in theory, just a little squeeze
he's just
like
more
that.
Letting her, do her own thing.
Yeah,
see, the look there. He's not that concerned.
Yeah,
of course he knows he can get her, so
I'll take care of it. So at this point,
it's a pretty good move.
This isn't really a very actiony movie at this point. Hour and a half.
No, we had
it's a love story.
We had the little montage, and and then we have this. The voiceover is kind of unfortunate here.
It is a little bit artsy, like
it's not even art. It's a bit too on the nose here.
Because it's her voiceover the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes kind of like I don't know, Danielle Steele romance novel of something. Can you read my mind?
This doesn't work so well. And they could have. I think that this scene could have ended after the drop and everything, and just kind of like a little bit of taking home this.
Yeah.
It does start to drag here.
But because this was in the pre-internet age, we're still moving at the analog speed. We're not. I mean, 56K modems seem fast compared to what's going on here.
Right.
We're just like, we're gonna take it in. Back then, this.
Yeah, I'm
this
totally
felt
for
like
that, but they pretty much established what they need to establish.
It is going on a little while. But because of that, we feel that we're just watching, the young love, and
we can see just from what they're doing. We don't need to hear it from her. We can just tell.
Watching this without the sound, it's the visuals are doing the job enough. So you can just get rid of it. But I don't imagine that back when you saw the people who saw this in the theater, if they were smirking at this, I feel like they weren't cynical enough, or they weren't, they didn't have the references of other movies in their mind, and they probably didn't think this was super cheesy. But I think now we're kind of like, it's. I remember rewatching it last week and was like, oh, okay, like, I get it. It's from her point of view, and it's a very emotional scene for her.
So it's just badly written too.
So that was like a 4-minute just whole sequence of Lois and Superman falling in love along their flight. So now when she dies, we're really going to feel it. That was the investment
spoiler,
of that.
But, yeah.
Spoiler. If you haven't seen Superman the original yet, get on it. Takes off. That's believable. Like it. That works.
Yeah, just completely steps off and is like, all right, I'm out.
So in the preview for the new one, they had the sonic boom effects and all that kind of going, which look beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's what we need for today. We need that look to it, because we're not going to buy it. We're going to just kind of
establish that he can fly like crazy fast and
supersonic.
Right.
I mean, watching him fly here, it's kind of like, compared to today, it's like, it's kind of slow. Like, but
it was just enough to have him fly.
Nice, and then he establishes right around that Clark is here, so there's no suspicion.
It takes some balls too to just show up immediately afterwards and be like, you can't even recognize me, can you? And he's showing off a bit, I think.
So I think the new one, to work that dynamic of Superman playing both sides. How about Neil LeBlute doing like Little Company of Men, twisted version, like so destroying Lois Lane's heart.
So instead of going clumsy, he's just complete like he's the total ass.
Sadistic, just pure sadistic playing with her. Now notice that shot there, great shot by Donner. The two sides of Superman. We have the mirror in the background, and we have Clark, and great moment there where he wants to tell
his
her
posture.
That is awesome. Lois, I have something. So right away he wants to tell her. Look at that. Look at that.
And again, look at the difference in posture. He's slouching now a little.
So well done. Man, that's... Now, being a kid, like, I never pay attention. There's no way as a kid I'm picking up on that. Like, holy cow, did you see Christopher Reeve play both roles like that? You just subconsciously, instinctively get it.
Right.
But now, this is really the first time that Lex Luthor becomes aware of him.
Right.
And is going to be kind of having to alter his plans so that Superman can't challenge it or stop it.
He seems to like the challenge, of course. Obviously he's full of himself as the greatest criminal mastermind, as they repeat.
And Hackman does a great job of delivering on that, right? Just playing that pompous kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that the wig that he has on has the gray hair a little bit, the streaks of gray hair going on. It's playing on that, what kind of became a cliche is that the mastermind who has the bumbling sidekick.
Sure. It's a necessary thing. I mean, I guess they didn't need a bumbling sidekick, but it's necessary. You're not just gonna have Luthor by himself all the time scheming and just talking to the camera, or he needs to interact with somebody,
right?
Obviously, so you
give
him his own crew.
Could we say that Pinky and the Brain are modeled off of Lex Luthor? And
I think it's more of an archetype, probably. That's that you've seen throughout. Back to, I don't know, Dr. Frankenstein and Igor.
Okay, great point. Yeah. So the mad scientist always has his Igor, kind of always has that type of dynamic. And I guess tonally it just kind of works for some comedic relief, and it puts the pressure off a little bit.
Right.
It's not overly serious. And he always has kind of the airheaded kind of girl with. The mad genius surrounds himself with people who he can feel above.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the idea?
He figures out his weakness.
Well, it's like in the second one when Lex Luthor goes to the Fortress of Solitude and plays the crystals.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the crystals where his mom is talking.
Right.
It's like, the Phantom Zone can be broken apart by a nuclear explosion. And it's like, well, okay, I guess we're just using the dialogue to kind of set that up. So here we have the aerial shot of the missile, 1 hour, 38 minutes, 2 seconds. So if we're looking at the screenplay and the momentum of the story, I mean, we really haven't had any massive conflict yet.
No, this is the beginning. I guess this is the third act we're getting into now.
This is very James Bondy, by the way, having the remote control car.
Yeah, he's got his gadgets and everything. The lair, again, with the...
Lair, gadgets. So he's kind of Bond villainish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got the John McEnroe hair going on. Google that reference. I don't know why I said that. It's kind of 10 years out of date, but we're part of the secret convoy. Well, we'll stop for a little. Oh, because it's the lady in red. That's what's going on. Guys will always stop for a girl. And here's Ned Beatty, comic relief. In a newer version, there probably won't be a Ned Beatty kind of character.
Well, I mean, I think, with the villain being Zod, I don't think there's a role for that kind of stuff.
Well, because with Zod, he still had that, would they call him Nan? The big kind of...
Yeah, he did have the developers, but
Who was modeled kind of off of Jaws from Bond again. Like the Jaws teeth character guy.
yeah, but I can see that.
Because the Nolan, which I guess we just have to accept, that's kind of the style that everyone is mimicking and used to. There was no real comic relief in any of those Batman films, right?
No, I probably could have used a little more. I mean, there's a moment or two of levity. In each
Alfred
one,
kind of brings some
a
of
little
the
bit.
jokes.
There's a line or two in each one that has its.
If anything, maybe it's like the villain that brings it. Like the Joker kind of had the jokes going on. That's who he is.
Yeah.
Here, there's that fun. I think this really influenced those films that we loved in the early '80s, where there's always, no matter how serious the film or adventurous it is, E.T. or Indiana Jones. I mean, there's always just these moments of that. And again, John Williams scoring all of it, so it's automatic. Like he has that comedic score that. So it just feels like this one will be more serious. All this stuff will probably be gone. We probably won't be seeing any of this kind of.
The early reviews seem to say it's not quite so.
Super dark.
Right. It's not quite in that Batman style, which is good.
Which it shouldn't be.
No. I'm hoping for something maybe in between that and the Marvel movies. Something in that kind of middle ground. I mean,
right.
You have the serious, realistic Batman movies, and then you have the more embracing what the comic book feel of the Iron Man and Avengers.
Well, it seems like that whole DC, even I guess their Vertigo line, right? You have Sin City, you have Watchmen, you have V for Vendetta. They all kind of have just a much darker sort of a outlook. That's true. Mm-hmm. Because Green Lantern is a DC property.
Yeah.
But they tried to make it a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Without doing very well.
I didn't know much about Green Lantern, not to go too much off subject. But it was a really cool universe, and a lot of the ideas were great. It just tried way too hard to be an Iron Man, Spider-Man, and the too much comedy kind of ruined it a little bit.
Yeah,
there were some really great things in there. So now we're following. This is really the third or fourth big sequence following Lex Luthor following through on his plan.
Oh, this is this is actually quite a long sequence, really. And we're showing the whole plan. We're showing them Otis screw up the plan and redo the. I mean, this might not be so necessary either that they're doing this twice.
Right?
Did they have to show Otis screwed up the first time?
Yeah. And we're talking about a 2.5-hour movie here.
Mm-hmm. I always forget how kind of quickly this happens here. I mean, all of a sudden, this is it. This is the end game we're in.
We've basically slowly gone through an hour and 45 minutes in the movie, and now into the end, it's like a bullet. It's just once the dam cracks, it's just going to be Superman to the max, just saving the world.
We're establishing where everybody is right now, and then
we get Lois is kind of in Cannonball Run for a moment there with that character in the car. Newsroom, TV shows, Superman. As a character, he doesn't really know of Lex Luthor yet.
No, this is a cool moment too when he actually calls him with the frequency.
It's interesting that in a movie where imagine watching The Dark Knight, and you're an hour and 44 minutes into it, and the Batman doesn't know about the Joker yet.
Right.
It's a very different pace. It's just a whole different story.
Well, the hero villain confrontation isn't even really the focus of this movie though. I mean, the focus is Superman. Yeah.
Well, Batman Begins. Batman doesn't learn of the Scarecrow.
Right. There's really no true villain in Batman Begins so much. Even the Scarecrow, he shows up. He does his thing, and you don't really learn about Ra's al Ghul until the very end. There's no ongoing confrontation.
It's just kind of little criminals here and there.
That's right. He talks to him on the dog whistle frequency that only he can hear.
This is pretty cool. So 1 hour 45 minutes basically, and we get the first time that
It's a little bit of a rainy
hero
angle there, actually.
That's it's a very stylized angle, yeah. Nicely done. Only he can hear, and so we're getting finally what will be the classic clash of villains. I love it in films when the hero main character and the bad guy villain, whenever they can have time to talk.
Yeah.
Whenever they can be in scenes together, because the more that we have, the stronger we identify with them. And the stronger we identify with choosing a side. When you have Jodie Foster, Hannibal Lecter, even you go to Speed with Dennis Hopper and Keanu Reeves.
Right.
Die Hard with Hans Gruber, John McClane.
That was
that's a great shot.
That was one of the first part of the original Superman franchise where they kind of did some weird power that doesn't actually make sense, but you just kind of roll with it at this point when he just all of a sudden has the uniform on. And,
so
his clothes disappear. I mean, I don't know what power that is necessarily, but
so 1 hour 46 minutes. That was a cool shot. He falls out the window.
Yeah.
And it's an unbroken camera shot. I mean, it's a full shot, continuous.
But does he
dissolve?
Should he rip off his clothes instead? I don't know, but the dissolve is a bit.
So is he like
a bit funky.
Sort of mind powers? He always has the Superman thing on, but he makes you think it's a suit.
It's like when Optimus Prime had the trailer and then transformed. The trailer was
Just
gone all of a
trailer
sudden. I guess it's the same.
Suspension
same
of disbelief. And I guess he just drills through the ground. There we go. Now, it is losing some of the fun if you sit there and just constantly, okay, well, this wouldn't happen. But look how fast he's spinning around. We believe that.
Yeah, that's a great moment.
I mean, that's like a drill, right? A drill going through cement, so.
I got no problem with that, but just the falling down seemed like a bit of a shortcut, that's all.
Look at that. And now look how cool Luthor's just sitting in the chair. So.
Yeah, this is where they cut out I think they try to freeze him and use fire and everything. And
that could
power
be
shot there.
Luthor kind of testing Superman to see what he can get, what can hurt him or not.
And after seeing him be, kind of like having fun with it with the criminals and everything, and kind of just not being now he's actually intimidating here. Superman's got a bit of a the look he gives Otis there is not like what we saw him when he was just fighting the petty criminals before.
That's a great point. So that's pissed off Superman.
Yeah. So
we're seeing some of the different sides. Now we got some archival footage of missiles being shot.
No, I'm sure they filmed this just for the...
So the pace is really going to start to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like any movie made today.
Well, we have this is the Bond moment again, the villain telling his plan to the captive audience.
Great point. It really seems like that was the movie to kind of...
It probably inspired the Luthor character, at least in here, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And even his scheme seems taken from one of those.
I don't need a geography lesson from you. I just floated through space for 3 minutes earlier and learned the knowledge of 28 galaxies. I feel like the San Andreas fault was made a big deal back in the 80s. Like, a lot of people were paranoid about that.
Well, yeah.
So it's kind of them, or 70s,
Yeah, it's
80s.
not as much of a buzzword as it was.
So that'll be a surprise. Do the opponents nowadays need to have a master plan in a Superman movie like that? Does Lex Luthor still have to have the...
I think if you did do the Luthor character, you would have to have some sort of plan that's just, he's a schemer like that. That's what you need. But not every villain needs a plan,
What was the dynamic like? I never watched Smallville. What was the Luthor Superman dynamic in that? Was it little things?
By the time he actually became like the true villain, I was done watching it. So.
Oh, because they started out friends or something.
Yeah, they're friends, and he's kind of like the morally gray type who you don't know what he's exactly up to, and I don't know. But yeah, he was more the businessman type.
Because that's something, if you're making a movie, if you get tasked with, okay, I'm going to make the new Superman, You could go to that TV series and say, hey, let's see how they explored some early ideas of these characters.
They're probably better off not taking inspiration from the television show. But although, I don't know, if they want to give the new Lex Luthor that ascot or scarf or whatever he's got going on there.
Gene Hackman working the scarf right here.
That's an outfit right there.
One hour, 15 minutes, 35 seconds. And now we get the nice dissolve, the map of the San Andreas Fault to the overlook there. And then Lois Lane happens to be driving along it in a red car. Red means danger.
Yeah, so all of a sudden everybody from Metropolis happens to be in California, I guess. I don't know.
In the places where they need to be. Hoover Dam.
Sure. Which, I mean, I guess they never actually established where Metropolis is. It could be anywhere. I think it's supposed to be in the center of the country still because... You know, they have the two missiles going both directions, so... There's some John Ratzenberger action there.
Cliff from Cheers. Yep. Look it up, Google.
Shows up in the Superman movies, shows up in Star Wars movies, everywhere.
So now Superman must stop both missiles.
Right.
So that's the equivalent of Batman choosing Dent or Rachel in The Dark Knight?
Sure. Choice isn't really up to him, though, as we'll see.
Isn't it really cool that you have the villain there, and Superman's just kind of listening to him, like, you know, hey, we're not gonna fight at the moment. Just, okay, what's your plan? Let's hang out.
He's not aware of the imminent danger, I guess. But shouldn't his super hearing pick up the missiles? I don't know.
Interesting that the color yellow is kind of the big visual theme at the moment. So is that supposed to indicate yellow is like a weakness? But yellow is the color of Superman's strength. And Luthor's about to weaken him. So
I think it's more that just mustard yellow is the color of the 70s.
It's the color of the 70s is mustard yellow. I did have school uniforms in like second grade of brown and yellow.
Yes.
Here we go. Vision. Nice.
Yeah, that's a bit of a...
But he can't see through lead, right?
Like this, you diseased maniac.
The throw.
He's pretty righteous.
He was kind of cocky right there.
Yeah, he's pretty righteous.
Superman's just like, hey, that wasn't like he revealed.
Well, he's never had any difficulty. I mean, nothing. He's never run into anything that could stop him.
So the first time we see Superman afraid. Man, Christopher Reeve looking like a real life Superman right there. Wow. Born for the role. One hour, 53 minutes, 24 seconds. It's really cool how just this human, cocky character just goes up and puts it around his neck and you can't do anything about it. Look at Reeve selling just like you feel like the strength is gone from his body.
Yeah. And they had this, this similar moment in the Superman Returns, but which was far more brutal. It was, I don't know, a bit tonally off for that movie.
Okay.
If you remember, I don't know.
I saw it once and I barely remember a lot of it. It just felt like too much of a homage, just like.
Right.
But now this is kind of one of the cliches of bad guy megalomaniacs. They feel like their plans work and they leave. They never sit there.
No.
To make sure that the hero is dead.
And you have the susceptible henchman or whatever who's.
She's feeling for him.
Right.
We have a nice shot there of the missiles. 1 hour, 54 minutes, 44 seconds. Tension. Superman can't do it. Now we go to her. Look at her. You know what's going on in her brain right now. You know what she's thinking about. So finally, an hour and 55 minutes into the movie, Superman's in genuine peril.
Right, for the first time.
First time. And if we're watching a version of that movie today, we want that happening earlier.
The adversity would probably last longer. It might come earlier, and then there would be like the fall followed by the rise again. For a movie that's coming out in 3 months, there's doesn't seem to be a lot of information out there.
They might want to. I feel like right after Iron Man comes out, they kind of might start pushing it really heavy.
Yeah.
Because this is your favorite franchise, what were the things for you as a kid that just instinctively or something like, why were you so drawn to this character?
Well, I mean, just that ability to just do anything is just, I mean, that's what everybody wants. I mean, it was before being, the anti-hero or anything was cool, I guess. That was never anything that appealed to me. It was more just the ability to do anything, to fly and not have any limits to what you can do. That's appealing to anyone, I think.
It's one of the classic dreams of kids, right?
Yeah.
Always wanting to fly.
And he had all the classic and best powers, X-ray vision and laser vision and all the other things he could do. And he had the cape. I mean, everybody wants to have a cape.
Well, one of the first things we all do, put that bed sheet around, tie it around our necks and jump on the bed, right?
My mom made me. I was Superman, I think, for Halloween when I was like 5. The homemade costume and everything. And
it says a lot that when Tim Burton's Batman came out in '89, that was considered dark.
Yes.
That Superman had really been the only comic book at that point that had been taken to such a big level. And when Batman comes out in Burton's version,
it was more twisted.
Like, wow, this is really sinister and dark and going to places that we haven't gone before.
Well, they had taken cues from the reimagining of comic books in a lot of ways that happened during the 80s. So.
Right, we're all living kind of in the post Frank Miller sort of.
Yeah, this is before this movie at least is before any of that.
Alan Moore kind of thing.
Right.
Did the idealism of Superman also kind of maybe just appeal on an instinctive level as a kid? Just a guy who's he's like a policeman. I
don't know if that. That's that little moment with the hayseeds. I don't know.
Superman chasing a missile.
Feels like it's imported from the Richard Lester movie. I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe that's more of a personal thing, but yeah, the total idealism, that thing to aspire to be. People want to be Batman, but do you aspire to be Batman? Probably not. It's not something. It's more like, oh, that would be cool to do, but it's not like mantra, a way to live.
Sure. Superman's like the kid who was raised right.
Yeah, there you go.
And Batman's like the guy who got the kid who got up from tragedy.
The psychological trauma.
Yeah,
right.
That's a cool shot from the point of view of the engines burning on Superman's face, nothing happening to him. And really, from this point on, Superman doesn't necessarily face an opponent, and he's not in peril from this moment on. There was that moment when he had the kryptonite around his neck, and now he's just saving the day for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, this is, kryptonite's his weakness, but I guess, as they say in Superman 2, his real weakness is that he cares for everybody, and that's I would like to see that, even if not in Man of Steel, if it happens in the inevitable sequel or whatever. One of the things that I've heard proposed sometimes with the Superman character is that, again, just that weakness that he can't save everybody, which we see with his father, and we see here when he has to ultimately, he's not able to fix everything in California. Right. That's his big weakness, is that he can't, even with his powers, he can't be everywhere at once. He can't save everybody.
That would be a really interesting angle.
That was one of the better moments again for Superman Returns, when he hears everybody. When he has the hearing, he can hear everybody's cries for help, I guess. That's a key point, I think, that needs to be used.
Because, in our world nowadays, with terrorist threats and just this general unease, we kind of are looking for that Superman, and he can't be everywhere at once. So what do you do? How does he feel about that?
Yeah, like I was saying about Batman. I mean, people might Batman might be the cool guy. Like that's the one people want to be. You know, if everybody was like Batman, then we'd be kind of in bad shape. But if everybody acted like Superman, that's more the ideal.
Superman flying through the Earth there. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool shot.
Yeah. You know, you get one of the templates for a lot of superhero movies is the landmarks in peril, Golden Gate Bridge.
And in The Amazing Spider-Man, there was a Spider-Man saving a kid from a car falling off of a bridge, which has a direct connection here. he's repairing the fault line. Look at that.
Well, yeah, that I mean, they go big right away. I mean,
it's
this
red.
Is one of the things you can do. You can go down into the Earth's mantle and lift the entire. I don't know if this would actually work, but
hey, I'm going to go with it. That looked badass right there. Just that color and that was a nice shot.
Yeah, we have the Golden Gate Bridge falling. I mean, that's something. I mean, they literally used the Golden Gate Bridge again in X-Men, the bad X-Men movie. And,
the Brett Ratner.
Right. We've seen the Statue of Liberty used.
This is a great moment here.
Oh, and yeah. I remember this. This was one of the frames I had the Viewmaster of this movie.
Okay.
And this is one of the Superman with becoming the train tracks here, basically.
Viewmaster was the closest we got to iPhone Netflix of watching the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, you want to watch Superman? Here's 20 frames.
Yeah, instead of Googling John McEnroe, you can Google Viewmaster and see what that was our YouTube.
The primitive YouTube Viewmaster. Now we get the high-stakes, fast-paced, everyone in peril, Superman saving the day, 20 minutes of nonstop action. So 2 hours of character and emotion building and theme and relationships, and 30 minutes of everything hitting the fan.
Again, going big, we see a dam exploding in the fault line.
Fault line, bridge, bus full of kids.
Yeah. He has to make sure that it's that man all right. Because, you know.
And Jimmy Olsen's in peril.
He pays attention to the little things, too.
Every character that we meet, has to somehow be in danger, and Superman is going to save them.
All but one.
That's right. But now the movie's really moving. It's just clicking along.
Exploding down. That's a good effect. Yeah. I mean,
great.
It's all miniatures, but obviously it looks great.
Feels more palpable than CGI looks crisp.
I love that it leaves Jimmy Olsen right in the path of an avalanche. So you're fine here.
Well, again, she couldn't, I guess, gas up, but
yeah.
Now the car just happens to. That's where all the rocks are falling. And look, in the rearview mirror, we have the animation of the fault line.
This is pretty disturbing, actually, the whole buried alive thing. Rather brutal, actually.
Yeah, kind of terrifying the way that they film it. Wow. Yeah. The town's going to be flooded.
Yeah. I mean, there is a shot of the town that's like really obvious miniatures, but what are you going to do? Again, no, you don't notice. I mean, I'm sure the first time I saw this, I didn't care. The first 10 times.
Sure.
Just, watching it over and over again. Like, here, this is...
And for the most
like
part...
a model railroad town.
Isn't this like 20 minutes of like dialogue-free action? It's
almost
pretty much. Like, we're just watching the visuals of him stopping everything. That's not... Yeah, that looks kind of cheesy.
The man-made avalanche here.
Right there. That looks very model.
Yeah, it still works. And then meanwhile, we have the gruesome death of Lois Lane.
And we really haven't seen much of her since the interview Flight Romantic. She hasn't really done much.
Right.
We've seen her, driving around and kind of doing that. But that was her big moment. And now we care about her. That looks very modelly right there. He saved the day. So we're just happy to cheer for him.
See, yeah, he looks like he's satisfied there. Now maybe they're very... Now, maybe if he didn't have that moment of self-satisfaction, maybe he saves Lois. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
he was kind of like...
human weakness.
He's kind of got a little bit of an ego going on, right?
A little bit. I mean, how can you not?
This is like a Lois Lane in a Saw movie here.
It is. This is very... It's a pretty raw scene.
Superman, make your choice.
I mean, they really linger on this thing.
Listening to the producer's commentary, they kind of didn't know how to end. Because I guess everything fell behind kind of schedule in terms of filming both. So they wanted to make the release date. and they're like, hey, let's we got to think of some kind of ending, because like you were saying that this was supposed to be the end of the second movie. Reversing the rotation was the end of part 2.
Yeah, I do know that was the original ending of the second movie, was the rotation of the Earth thing.
You know, for a movie that is a comic book movie, that's kind of a gruesome close-up there.
Well, this whole thing here, I mean, I'm sure seeing this for the first time, nobody's thinking, okay, he's going to go back in time.
Yeah.
I mean, this just seems pretty cut and dry here.
Now, and this really hadn't been done before, where a superhero character is genuinely mourning the death of someone he cares about, like on the big screen like this. I think back in the day, you're competing with like the cheesy Captain America movie, the bad 70s Spider-Man movies, Thor, you know, those.
Well, a lot of times in these movies, they don't really linger on the grief.
Look at how gray she is, too. Look at how they just told the makeup on her. I mean, she looks lifeless. It's pretty hardcore. And they're just giving and the music here.
You think about, say, another type of, Star Wars came out around the same time, and it doesn't really linger on the grief either, you know.
I mean, she looks dead there.
His aunt and uncle are dead, and he has a moment of reflection, and it's like, okay, we're moving on to the next thing.
No, I'm going with you, right.
Right.
Yeah, name a similar type of movie, superhero, big budget, actiony, or that pays this kind of... And you can just imagine the music in the background, what's going on right now. The fading of the shots, the dissolving. I mean, this is Superman's grief building up in him.
Yeah, and he doesn't just have grief, he has super grief, as you're saying.
This is the grief like no one else has felt on the earth before. Here we go. The first dialogue that he's spoken in like 10 minutes. Nice. Yeah, look at selling it. And we never return to that level of emotion.
The hero's choice here.
In the following films.
Well, we get to that level in the second one when he gives away his powers.
Right. But in 3, I think 3 and 4 fail because of that.
We don't get to that. We don't get to the level at all.
No. Why all of a sudden do they awaken? Because they know he's going to spin the earth around. Why do they come out of the clouds and they're like...
Well, I think that's in his head. I don't know if they're actually awaking, but maybe.
Well, the Kryptonians, so they have some kind of education system where they implant them answers for every possible question into your mind.
Right. And they also teach them that apparently spinning the earth the other way turns back time.
This is also the Flash's power or something, right? Isn't able to do something similar? But that's a cool visual. This is a nice... I like that angle a lot of... and just the look on his face.
It's an emotional ending, and it makes sense to the film, but it's probably not the way you want to end your first movie if you're definitely making another one, because, again, it's like, can't he just do this every time now? And just every time anything goes wrong, I mean, if Clark Kent gets a parking ticket, can he just go back?
No!
It doesn't even take him that long. I mean, what is this? A couple minutes, and all is well.
And let's not talk about what the gravitational effects on the Earth would be. But we return now. Today we would consider this a cheat.
Yeah,
pretty much. Like, it's like ending a movie in a dream. Like, oh, the whole thing was a dream. Now everything's okay.
I guess mechanically it's a bit of a cheat, but again, it's. He made the choice to interfere with human history. I guess he made the choice for. Look
at his reaction though. Look at the expression that he's. Only he knows what just happened, and the joy and how happy he is. That's great acting. Great acting.
And he makes the choice of the human choice.
That's always the right choice, the emotional choice.
Right.
Even though we might go back and say, oh, it's illogical, or it's kind of cheesy or a cheat. What we walk out of here with is the emotion of what just happened.
Right.
Which is why The Dark Knight Rises a lot, even though the film is really flawed throughout, the last 5 minutes just pack in the emotion so much that you leave like, okay, that felt like a good ending. But then when the emotions wear off, you kind of go back and you're like, it didn't make as much sense, or kind of was forced in a lot of ways, but, we'll buy it. But here, that was a very emotional, powerful, character-based decision of what just happened. And that's why we like it. That's why, it sticks with us.
And again, he doesn't really beat the bad guy. He just kind of goes and grabs him now.
Yeah, and now it's like, okay, there's no real threat.
Right.
And we're not going to ask, why doesn't Superman just keep spinning backwards and stop every tragedy that ever befall the humanity. Holocaust.
It was rage time travel. You don't get that.
Chernobyl, all those things. Now we know everything's okay. Lois is saved. It's kind of like a conventional
cleaning
thing.
Up. Yeah, it's cleaning up some business here. And, Superman isn't a vigilante. He's just he turns in each of these guys to the police. The earlier montage of the criminals, he turns them all into the police. It's all.
We might have missed a moment between him and Luthor where he comes back and he gets them, because they kind of just shortcut it. They're
That's
just
a nice little reveal though with
the bald
going bald for the moment here.
Because we hadn't seen him in the film bald yet, right?
No. So
it's almost now he's he's never been in prison before, or he's managed to kind of. So now Superman has pushed him into this iconic supervillain role.
We're all part of the same team.
And that flying's still cool. That looks cool. It might not.
And this is the great moment that they do in all the movies. The victory lap, I guess you could call it.
So this is that's a beautiful shot. Oh yeah, that's straight out of 2001, kind of inspired. And the music here is swelling.
And the last moment here, which you would not get away with in any of these movies, the brief moment of breaking the fourth wall. There you go.
That's just so cool. And just the music crescendoing, and now because these title effects were so cool, they're just going to run them into the ground.
Oh yeah, we got another 8 minutes of the now they're coming at us instead of coming out of the screen.
There's a little 8 minutes of this. And on the producer's commentary, they said that everyone in the theater stayed until the end of the credits because of this effect.
No, I would stay for the music. Yeah. It's the one thing I'm gonna miss in Man of Steel is that they're not using those. I did like that they kept that for Superman Returns, but I guess if you're starting over, you want to go with a clean slate. But it's really hard to break the character away from that iconic theme.
Yeah.
You can't have I expect when Episode 7 comes out or whatever, the Star Wars theme's still going to be the Star Wars theme.
Right.
You can't imagine the movies without the theme. You can't imagine Indiana Jones without the Indiana Jones theme.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a disappointment that they're going away from that. But
yeah.
I can understand it on the one hand, but on the other hand, it feels like they go hand in hand, really.
And it's interesting because music, if you make a score, it could kind of be specific for what the character is going through, but Superman's such a character where he doesn't necessarily change that much, so the theme and his score could remain the same.
The theme fits the character. You can if you were reading the comic, if you're reading All Star Superman, you can hear the theme and it would still make sense.
Right.
So
yeah, music is so essential to that. It might be an interesting question to what are the films where you sit through the credit sequence at the end because of the music or because of some kind of element to it, like these three-dimensional, almost flying at you Superman titles,
right?
And just going through space here. And it's very few movies are able to kind of capture this moment. And this is a really interesting time in movie making because you have Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you have Star Wars, you have this, so that whole new era is just being born out of really great filmmaking fundamentals that really kind of started to be brought out with the film school generation in the 60s and 70s. And it's that expertise that creates the blockbuster, but that monster is going to eat itself soon, you know, and its success will be its downfall in a lot of ways, as Superman 3 and 4 kind of counteracts 1 and 2. It's interesting, back in the day here, imagine you're leaving the theater. The end of the credit sequence here does a James Bond thing where it says Superman will return next summer because they already had it planned.
Right.
But in general, you kind of didn't have that marketing push like there's going to be a sequel right away.
No.
You can expect some kind of continuing story.
No, and certainly not that they just knew it was going to happen without even knowing if this was going to be a hit or not. Yeah. And now, it's almost a foregone conclusion. You make a movie like this, it's going to make some money. I don't know if that they quite could know that for sure at the time, that it would be an instant success no matter what. Because
these are the first films in the 70s that are becoming hits. They're the risks.
Right.
And once they pay off, then everyone says, oh, now it's kind of safe to, the road has been paved, so now everyone can follow in safety.
Yeah.
But the result of that is that there isn't that daring or there isn't that creative joy kind of fueling it. It's more like, let's repeat the steps and we can kind of
it's more of a product a lot of times. I mean, for all the Marvel movies do right, they do follow a formula for the most part, one that's working, but they all kind of try to have the same feel in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe, I don't know, I wasn't obviously old enough to read comics back when this came out, but maybe there's some crossover in the comic books that they're kind of marketing people to prepare for the second one, but probably not as much as they do today. And their awareness isn't really kept up as strongly back then as it is now. So you have to see the trailer for part 2, and it is going to be 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And the beginning of part 2 is going to retell the story of part 1.
Yeah, which is actually which is funny enough. That's one of my favorite sequences of these movies, and that's not even any new footage, but just the Superman theme shown over the whole montage from the first movie. It does get you ready for that second movie.
Puts you in that mood,
It was
right?
something that was necessary at the time, because you're not going to watch it on video right before you go see it, or whatever. You need that refresher.
Yeah. So this film overall really focused on the character.
Yeah.
It's a slower paced movie, and it really sets up General Zod and some more action, but surprisingly more theme in the second film.
Theme, and I would say again tone as well. Like that's something that's really important for the Superman movie, I think, is just to get that tone right, to have that early opening of when he's growing up, to have that kind of a classic America feel, small town feel, that type of thing, and then to have the difference of the metropolis, the city, the heroic, idealistic tone, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And now, having watched it, the summary of the structure of this movie is basically, we have a complete mini movie on Krypton.
You have 3 movies.
Then you have a complete mini movie in
Smallville.
But there's really no conflict. It's just kind of beginning, middle, end. Here's what happened.
Yeah.
And then you have the third longer movie, which is
pretty episodic. Yeah.
Yeah. The only real conflict comes from Luthor, and these mini episodes with these kind of criminals, so we can see the strength of Superman and his powers.
Right.
And now in part 2, we're going to get a much more focused menace. Just kind of, it is.
Yeah, we get the big bad, if you can call it, which works sometimes, but then that's something that if we talk about too, is where that I think that's the biggest problem. It's not even just the heavy comic relief, which is okay, but more it's just so tonally off. It's kind of all over the place in terms of tone. I mean, we had this one. You had that kind of dark scene at the end, towards the end, where she's getting buried alive, but it fits. Yeah, it fits where the movie's going. We can talk more about it in 2, but that movie kind of veers, and even in terms of some of the characterization too, it feels like this, where you could say this was 3 movies sequentially. That almost feels like 2 or 3 movies just kind of spliced into each other
tonally, and
right.
And we'll talk about that because it's 2 directors, essentially.
Yeah, and you can feel it. So.
Okay, so lessons to hopefully be learned for the new movie would be, it's okay to take some time to have character, and get us to care about the people.
Mm-hmm. Decide what your tone, what color your movie's going to have, and then try to stay somewhat consistent with it. Doesn't mean you have to be deathly serious all the time. Doesn't mean you have to be, campy, but just kind of stick with don't wildly veer back and forth to the point where audiences don't know where the emotion of the film is supposed to be in any certain moment.
Pay attention to the character's journey, and what set pieces and images have come before, so you have to now reinvent them to top them, but at the same time make them feel like they're not being forced, or like a competition of some sort, like doing this just to do it. It has to work for what's going on.
Yeah, and reach, not to make too much of a pun, but reach for the sky in terms of just making the character really has to be an icon. He can't just be another superhero movie. It has to be really iconic. And you do need those moments. They need to come organically, but you need those iconic moments of, like the kid lifting the car and those type of things. You need that from a Superman movie, because he's a myth, the American myth, I guess you could call it, the legend.
Myth in his ideals and in his actions. Right. And hopefully it'd be a great accomplishment if we left the theater feeling like we wanted to tie a bedsheet around our neck and, pretend like we were flying. Can that magic and that joy come back?
Please stay away from any sort of allusion to the Jesus Christ archetype, which is so
Superman
Returns.
So,
just lay off that, because that's just way too easy.
Emotional, character-based, with practical effects that still hold up today. What a great movie. We're all going to see the reprofit because of our curiosity. But what specific elements are we most looking forward to? Is it the characterization of Superman? Or just new and exciting set pieces? What elements about Man of Steel are you most excited to see? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. This movie night journey will continue with Superman 2, due at the end of April. So make sure you subscribe and follow me in order to keep up to date with the latest videos. Until next time, remember, we get more of what we pay for. So if we don't want let's not watch. And as always, long live good movies.